Tonight, you are not just getting ready for a night's sleep. You are beginning a journey, not one that takes you far away, but one that brings you back to your own self. Perhaps you have asked yourself, why did that happen to me? Why did I have to go through loss and pain, even though I tried to live a good life? Maybe you have not found the answer yet, but in these quiet moments, let your heart listen, because it is possible that everything that has happened carries a deeper meaning you have not yet seen clearly. Imagine this. You open your eyes to a misty morning, and in front of you stands a small monastery nestled deep in the mountains and forest. There is no more noise, no more worries or obligations. There is only you and pure stillness. Today, the old monk who lives in that monastery has agreed to speak with you. He has lived through many seasons of falling leaves, and has witnessed countless souls pass through their suffering. When you finally ask, "Master, why has my life been filled with so much unfairness?" he smiles, and from that smile, a conversation begins. The law of karma. The old monk gazed out toward the pine garden in front of the courtyard, where the first light of the day had just touched the dew still clinging to the leaves. He spoke slowly, his voice deep and calm like the surface of a still lake. You asked why your life is filled with suffering. But before we speak of suffering, I want you to understand this. Nothing happens by chance. You stayed silent, listening intently. He continued, in Buddhist teachings, this is the law of karma. Every thought, every action, every word is a seed. And every seed will sprout when the conditions are right. Just like when you throw a stone into a lake, even if you turn away, the ripples still spread and eventually reach the other side. Your life is no different. There are things you do today that seem small, yet they have the power to reach into the future. You suddenly remembered something from earlier this morning, on your way to the monastery. You had casually picked up a small stone and tossed it into the stream. The ripples had spread endlessly across the water. The old monk smiled, as if reading your thoughts. Just like that. Karma is not a punishment or a reward. It is simply a natural response, like how water reacts when something touches it. It is not biased. It does not choose sides. It is not slow, nor is it in a hurry. You hesitated, then asked, so, does that mean all the pain I am experiencing now is the result of what I once did? He shook his head gently. Not entirely. Some of the seeds were planted by you. Others were planted by people around you. But you are now living in the same soil. Some fruits come quickly. Others may take years, or even lifetimes, to ripen. The point is not to figure out who was right or wrong. The real question is, what seeds are you planting today? He bent down and picked up a fallen leaf. This leaf fell today, but its falling began the moment it was at its greenest. Everything has a reason, and if you understand that, you will no longer see yourself as a victim. You will see yourself as part of the flow. You looked at your open palm, imagining all the things you have thought and done, like stones tossed into the waters of your life. Some ripples you can see, others are still quietly spreading, and you begin to understand, suffering is not a punishment. It is the echo of something trying to wake you up. You and the old monk walked out onto the porch of the temple, where the morning sunlight streamed through the bamboo, casting a delicate pattern of light and shadow. Each step you took echoed softly against the wooden floor, like the sound of time itself passing by. He walked slowly beside you and said, Some people hear about karma and become afraid, thinking that if they made mistakes in the past, their future will be nothing but pain. But the truth is the opposite. Understanding karma is not about fear, it is about realizing you still have freedom. You looked over at him, your eyes filled with uncertainty. He looked back at you with warmth. You think that the stone you threw into the water is something you cannot take back. But you are not the stone. You are the one holding the stone. You can choose to throw it, or let it go. You can keep planting seeds of pain, or you can start planting seeds of compassion, patience, and understanding. Every moment of awareness is a new seed. You looked out at the peaceful meditation garden. The pine trees had lived for many years in the high mountains, bending with the wind, their roots digging deep into stone. No two trees were the same, yet each one thrived in its own unique conditions. The old monk paused under the shade of an ancient pine tree, placing his hand gently on its rough bark. Karma is not injustice. It is the absolute honesty of the universe. What you give will return to you, but not to punish, rather, to remind you of who you are. You shivered slightly, not from cold, but from the truth that had just been spoken. Perhaps everything you have been through is an invitation to return to yourself. The monk sat down on an old wooden bench by the path. His voice grew deeper. Many people ask, why do bad people live happily? Why do kind people suffer? But you cannot judge karma by looking at just one piece of the picture. Some fruits ripen in a day. Some have to wait for the next season. And sometimes, you will not see it happen in this lifetime. But it still grows, quietly, like tree roots deep beneath the ground. You sat in silence. Inside you, something was melting. Something you used to call resentment, unfairness, or fate. Now, it was taking a new name. It was becoming understanding. The monk looked at you, his eyes filled with kindness. You cannot change the past, but you can change how you understand it. And from that understanding, you begin to plant a different future. You looked into the distance. The morning sunlight had covered the surface of the lake, where gentle ripples still spread from a stone once thrown. Not loud, not rushed, just continuing to expand. Like everything in life, still unfolding from deep-rooted causes of its own. And you begin to understand, karma is not something to fear. It is the first light, guiding you to live differently. Starting from this very moment, the old monk stood up and continued leading you along the stone path that curved gently down the hillside. The wind whispered softly through the pine forest, creating faint sounds that felt like echoes from the past. He asked gently, "Do you know what makes karma truly come alive?" You shook your head. He replied, "Mindfulness. When you are not awake, you plant seeds unconsciously, and then wonder why the fruit does not turn out as you hoped. But if you are awake, if you are fully aware of every thought, every word you say, every way you respond, then at that very moment, you are already changing your future." You stayed quiet, listening to the slow rhythm of your heartbeat. What once seemed abstract suddenly became very real. You recalled moments when you lost your temper out of exhaustion. The words you said that hurt others without realizing the kind of seeds you were planting in their hearts. Negative seeds, he continued, do not just grow out there. In other people or in situations, they also grow inside you. Every time you complain, compare, or doubt, you are planting little thorns into your own heart. Then you wonder why life feels painful. But sometimes, it is not life itself, it is what is growing inside you. You look down at the ground, where dry leaves were decomposing into soft mulch beneath your feet. Perhaps suffering is like that, if it is not buried or swept away too quickly. It can become fertilizer for something deeper. And do not think that good seeds have to grow into something grand. He said with a smile, his eyes bright. A gentle glance is a seed. A moment of patience when being misunderstood. A quiet sigh in which you truly let go. These things are small, but the universe remembers them all. You suddenly thought of your aging father. The one you often lost patience with over trivial things. Yet he was the one who had quietly done everything for your family all these years. You had never once thanked him in words. That realization now rose within you like a gentle, aching tenderness. The monk looked at you, as if understanding your thoughts, returning to something small. That is already the beginning of awakening. And when you start living with awareness, every step you take, every choice you make, every look you give, they all become intentional seeds. So, you spoke, your voice filled with uncertainty. If I am living in the consequences of things I do not even remember planting, what should I do? He paused and pointed to the sky. A flock of birds was flying by, not fighting against the wind, but skillfully adjusting their wings. You do not need to remember everything. You only need to accept what is present and plant a new response. When someone hurts you, you can choose not to hurt them back. When life gets hard, you can choose to breathe slower, without bitterness. In that very moment, you are breaking an old chain of karma and beginning a new stream. You looked at him, as if seeing a path opening before you, not loud, not mysterious, but quiet and clear. You began to understand. The past is not a sentence. It is a starting point. And everything you do today, with awareness, is a new thread woven into the fabric of your life. Somewhere ahead, the temple bell rang out again in the distance. That sound echoed like a reminder that from this moment on, you can begin to replant your life. You and the old monk stopped beside a moss-covered stone table near the temple porch. On the table sat a cup of warm tea, plain. No sugar, no milk. He poured you a small cup, then looked into the thin steam rising from the surface. Do you see? It is the hot water that allows the tea to release its fragrance. Just like suffering, sometimes it is the condition that awakens your heart. You brought the cup to your lips and took a slow sip. The initial bitterness gently softened, turning into a pleasant warmth flowing down your throat. In that moment, you were not thinking about past mistakes or future worries. You were simply feeling, and that feeling was a part of life itself. The old monk placed his cup down and gently touched the cool surface of the table. Understanding karma does not make you run from what has happened. It helps you welcome the present as a vivid gift. And from here, you can choose to live differently. You stayed silent. Some truths require no response. They only need a quiet space in the heart to settle. You began to realize you do not need to go back to the past to change anything. You only need to stay awake in this moment, because this moment, if lived deeply, can change your entire future. The old monk looked at you, his gaze reaching into the deepest parts of your being. Do not wait for some distant day to live consciously. Today is where karma begins to shift. And do not measure your actions by how big or small they seem. A gentle word spoken in anger. A breath slowed down in the face of impulse. A kind thought instead of judgment. These are all seeds. They shape your life. The mountain wind passed once more through the temple roof, carrying with it the scent of pine and resin, a cool, fresh blessing from the earth and sky. And you knew, the first thing you needed to do after this conversation was not to change your whole life, but to change the way you walk through each small moment. Without rushing, without drifting, without returning pain for pain, but quietly planting seeds of compassion, even in the middle of struggle. Even before any flower blooms. You looked out at the temple garden, where the old pine trees stood still under the soft sunlight. They did not wish for anything. They simply lived fully through each season. And you smiled, the first smile of the day, not because everything was okay, but because you were now seeing everything with new eyes. From now on, you will live as if everything you do is planting something. Because that is the truth. As the sun rose higher, its light began to shine into the shaded corners of the temple courtyard. You and the old monk sat in silence for a while. No more teachings, no more questions, only stillness, like an answer beyond words. You no longer saw life as a tangled series of events, but as a river, where every ripple has its reason for being. Karma was no longer a rigid law. It had become an invitation to awaken, that you can begin again, from this very moment, from the way you think, the way you see others, the way you breathe. The old monk stood up, his hands gently clasped behind his back, eyes gazing far toward the mountains. There is still much for us to talk about, he said, but before we go on, let your heart rest for a while. Sometimes, the deepest understanding does not come from trying, but from simply allowing things to settle. You nodded softly. In your heart, there were no more tangled questions. Only a clear, weightless space, wide enough to receive the planting of a new seed. Impermanence, nothing lasts forever. The afternoon light gently settled over the temple roof, casting a golden hue that slid across the old clay tiles. You and the old monk once again strolled through the rock garden, where bonsai trees, shaped by time over decades, stood with branches curled in silent stories. The wind blew through, carrying a few dry leaves to the ground. The monk bent down, picked one up, and placed it in your hand. Do you see? This leaf did not fall in vain. It is simply completing its part in the endless cycle. You looked at the leaf, yellow, thin, and still, then looked up at the deep green canopy above. Perhaps life and separation have always walked side by side. The monk continued walking slowly, his voice calm and steady. In Buddhist teaching, the first truth to understand about life is impermanence. Nothing lasts forever. Joy is the same, so is sorrow. This body, these emotions, the person you love, the one who hurt you, all will change. You stayed silent. Images you thought long forgotten suddenly surfaced. A friend who left without a word. A love once vibrant that grew cold. A sorrow you thought would never fade. The monk stopped by a lotus pot where a withered flower remained. Just a few wilted petals clinging to the dry pod. Impermanence is not meant to frighten you or make you give up. He said, it is here to teach you to embrace every moment with gratitude. Because everything is temporary, everything becomes precious. You nodded slightly, as if something inside you had just been gently released. Perhaps it was the belief that things had to last forever that made their departure feel like loss. But if you see through the eyes of impermanence, then there is nothing to hold onto, and nothing truly to lose. Each moment becomes complete simply because it is present. The monk continued, "Those who suffer most are often those who try to hold on to what cannot be held. Holding on to someone who wants to leave. Holding on to youth. Holding on to an answer. A promise. An identity. But the more you hold, the further you drift from what is. Impermanence teaches you to let go, not of people, but of resistance, no longer fighting change. Instead, learning to live with it. You remembered the times you tried to cling to something that had already passed. Sometimes a relationship, sometimes an older version of yourself. And you understood, it was not the loss that made you tired. Loss is natural. Clinging, that is a choice." Wind chimes sang gently from the porch, each tone delicate as mist. You looked around. Everything was changing without anyone needing to control it. The light, the breeze, the scent of the trees, the fading taste of tea on your lips. And you quietly thought, if impermanence is the nature of all things, then resisting it is no different from resisting life itself. The old monk smiled softly, as if hearing your thoughts. When you understand impermanence, you will stop asking why someone changed, why you are no longer who you once were, why yesterday held happiness, and today feels empty, because that is the nature of things. And when you live in that truth, you become lighter. On the way back to the meditation hall, you noticed a lotus bud just beginning to bloom beside another flower that had already faded. You paused for a moment, no longer feeling regret, no longer needing to hold on, just looking deeply and seeing the beauty in both becoming and letting go. Because now, you understand, nothing lasts forever. But when you are fully present, even the briefest thing is enough to nourish a lifetime. By the time you returned to the temple porch, the sun had dipped behind the mountains. The final light of the day broke across pale golden clouds like a quiet punctuation mark of time. You and the old monk sat down on the steps, gazing out across the courtyard, where shadows from the trees had stretched and touched each other. No words were spoken for a long while. But in that silence, you felt something very clearly. Everything was moving. Even though you were doing nothing at all. The wind still blew. Leaves still fell. Light still shifted. And inside you, something was quietly changing. The monk finally spoke. "Do you see, even when you sit still, your body is aging, your mind continues to flow. The world keeps turning. Nothing stands still, not even for a moment." You nodded, feeling a strange emotion, part tenderness, part ache. He went on, "Before understanding impermanence, you live with many expectations, that people should remain as you wish. That good feelings should last. That love will never fade. That the body will never weaken. But when you truly grasp the inescapable nature of change, you begin to release all expectations. And hold on to just one thing: awareness in the present moment." You looked at him, and your heart felt lighter. The things you once resisted now seemed easier to accept. You began to see, you do not need to keep anyone, hold on to anything, or mourn what has passed. Because it is not that you lost those things, it is that they were never meant to stay. The monk poured you another cup of tea, warmer, richer than before. "Drink," he said, "because this tea, will never be exactly the same again. You smiled, not a loud laugh, but enough to warm your heart. You understood, each moment is a unique being. If you are not fully present with it now, there will never be another chance quite like it. Above, birds flew back to their nests. Below the porch, an oil lamp had just been lit, its small flame glowing warmly in the darkening space. You turned to the monk and gently said, "I understand now. Nothing stays. But that is exactly why I want to be real with everything I still have." He nodded, his gaze affectionate, as if he had waited a long time to hear you say that. And then both of you sat quietly, with no more words needed, because everything that had to be said had already melted into the silence. A breeze drifted through, lifting the leaf from the table and setting it softly on the ground. You bent to pick it up, not out of attachment, but simply to hold it in your palm one last time, like a quiet farewell to something that was passing through. Night had fallen over the mountain temple, bringing with it a perfect stillness that only places far from the world can preserve. The chirping of insects from the forest echoed faintly, mingling with the soft tinkling of the wind chime on the porch. You and the old monk remained side by side, without needing any light, without another lesson, for now. The silent changes in the space around you were already a living lesson in impermanence. The monk spoke softly, as if speaking to the wind itself. The miracle is not that you can stop change, but that, in the midst of all that change, you can still keep a peaceful heart. You listened to every word as if it seeped into your bloodstream. You no longer needed to make others stay. No longer needed to freeze a beautiful day in place. No longer needed to hold on to youth, to beauty, or to old dreams, because you had begun to learn something deeper. When you know you cannot keep anything forever, you start to cherish everything more deeply. The old monk brushed the edge of his robe aside and stood up, walking slowly, as if each step was in conversation with the earth and sky. Before leaving the porch, he paused, turned to you, and said gently, "Each time you suffer because of loss, remind yourself of this: you are living in a river that is always flowing. No one steps into the same water twice. But if you know how to bow at the right moment, you can still catch a drop of clarity." You stayed behind, sitting alone, watching the flickering light of the lamp by the window. Everything was still, but within that stillness, you could feel life flowing by, gently, without clinging, without judgment. Perhaps the lesson of impermanence does not make you cold or distant. On the contrary, it teaches you how to love more deeply, more quietly, and more unconditionally. To love someone not to make them stay, but to let them be who they truly are, whether they stay or go. To love a moment not to keep it, but to live it fully, as if it were the last time you would ever touch it. And you knew, in that simple truth, you had begun to walk the path of someone who truly knows how to live. The next morning, when you woke up, sunlight was filtering through the thin paper of the window screen. A new day had begun, not drastically different, yet not quite the same as yesterday. You stepped out into the temple courtyard, where dewdrops still clung to the leaves. Everything seemed peaceful, but you knew, even this peace is only temporary. Like everything else, it will change. The old monk was sitting on a stone bench beneath the pine tree. You approached and bowed lightly. He smiled, as if he already knew you would come, as if he had always been waiting, in a time that never rushed. You sat down beside him, saying nothing, Neither did he. The two of you simply listened to the morning birdsong, the distant sound of a broom sweeping the courtyard, the steady breath of a day unhurried. Then he spoke, his voice light as mist. The truth is, everything you see today is already passing. And the moment you realize that, you stop living like an owner and start living like a traveler who is grateful. You nodded. That one sentence unraveled into many layers in your mind. It was not just about time. It was about all the things you had tried to hold on to: reputation, self-image, other people's expectations, sweet memories. All of them were already passing. And you, if you did not learn to move with them, would always be pulled backward. He looked at you, his eyes neither sad nor joyful, just deep. Nothing belongs to you forever. No one belongs to you. Not even you belong to yourself in the way you once believed. So, do not hold on. But also, do not let go with indifference. Stay fully present with what remains, with a heart that clings to nothing. You looked at your hands, hands that once gripped so tightly to so many things, that once trembled from loss, that once feared letting go. And now, you gently relaxed them. You no longer needed to hold. What needs to come will come. What needs to leave, let it go gently. The monk turned his face toward the rising sun. His voice, like a whisper to the morning dew, said, "Impermanence does not take anything from you. It simply reminds you to love completely, to live fully, and to let go lightly." You stood, bowed deeply to him. There was nothing more to ask, nothing more to understand. You had just stepped beyond something very old within you, the fear of change. And where that fear had faded, a quiet peace had opened, like a window finally cracked open after a long winter. Impermanence is not just a concept in the teachings. It is the quiet pulse of all life. It is the reason flowers bloom and fade. People come and go. Joy rises and disappears. When we forget this, we suffer because we cling. But when we remember, we begin to truly live. No longer wasting what we have. No longer regretting what we cannot keep. But quietly present, loving, and letting go. Impermanence does not make us indifferent. On the contrary, because we know everything will pass, we treasure every moment more. A tender look, a simple meal, an afternoon beside someone we love, or simply a breath that is still whole. And in that way, each passing day is no longer a loss, but a complete chance to live as if it were the only one. Mindfulness, being awake in every moment. After a simple breakfast at the temple, just a bowl of plain rice porridge, a few slices of ginger, and a pinch of sesame salt, you and the old monk stepped into the garden. The sky was clear, sunlight poured golden across the stone path, and each step echoed clearly through the quiet space. You wondered, why is it that the simplest things here, eating, drinking, walking, breathing, bring such a deep and peaceful feeling? The old monk seemed to catch your thought. He stopped, turned to you, and asked gently, "Do you know what makes an ordinary moment sacred?" You remained silent. He answered softly, "Mindfulness." You had heard that word before, but to you, it still felt like an abstract concept. He explained, "Mindfulness is not about forcing focus or making yourself still. It is simply being fully present with whatever is happening. No judgment, no chasing, no trying to change anything. Just seeing and breathing with it." You suddenly recalled your life in the city. You had eaten without knowing you were eating, walked while staring at your phone, spoken while your mind wandered somewhere else. You had lived as if racing, from one moment to the next, forgetting the most precious thing of all, the moment you were in. The old monk stopped beneath a plum tree heavy with fruit. He gently picked a ripe one and placed it in your hand. Eat this fruit, but do just one thing, eat. You smiled, thinking it was simple, but when you truly looked at the plum, inhaled its fragrance, felt the smoothness of its skin, then slowly bit into it, listened to its delicate crunch, tasted the burst of sweet and tart on your tongue, you felt something strange. You had never eaten anything so deeply. The monk smiled. Mindfulness brings you home. Not home as in a place, but back to yourself, right in the moment you are living. You looked at him, and saw eyes that held no urgency, no weariness. Whether he was walking, sipping tea, or simply breathing, he was fully there, as if nothing else in the world mattered but that moment. And you understood. That is why he looked so at peace. It was not that he had fewer worries than you. He just lived more deeply. The old monk led you into a small meditation hall, with only a mat, a water jar, and a painting of a lotus blooming from the mud. He said, "You do not have to escape to the mountains or sit in long hours of meditation. You just need to be truly present in the smallest things. Washing your hands, folding a blanket, pouring water, listening to someone speak. Every moment is a doorway into awakening, if you step through it gently enough." You quietly sat down on the mat, doing nothing, trying nothing, just breathing in, knowing you were breathing in, breathing out, knowing you were breathing out. And you realized, for the first time in a very long time, you were actually here, not worrying about the past, not rushing toward the future, just alive, and that alone felt like a miracle. That noon, sunlight streamed across the temple roof like a golden silk veil. In the meditation hall, you remained still. There was no sound but your own breath, steady, slow, and vivid. No thought that needed chasing. No memory that needed pushing away. Everything only needed to be seen, allowed, and gently let go. The old monk sat beside you. His hands joined in quiet reverence. Then he asked what seemed like a simple question. When you are angry, do you know that you are angry? You stayed silent, then softly shook your head. He smiled kindly. That is what we often forget. Emotions come, but we do not see them. We just get swept away. Then we speak words that hurt others, do things we later regret. To be awake does not mean never getting angry. It means knowing when you are angry, and not being ruled by it. You reflected on times when you had snapped at loved ones, when you were misunderstood, when you said hurtful things just to feel less hurt yourself. And you realized, you had lived many moments unconsciously, like a small flame blown by the winds of emotion, burning through the things you valued most. He continued, mindfulness is the pause. It is the space where you can breathe before you react. It is the moment you choose to understand before you conclude, to listen before you reply, to empathize before you judge. You bowed your head. Inside, something began to soften, not because you had been forgiven, but because you were learning how to forgive yourself and the things that once hurt you. No one had taught you that in school. But meditation teaches it through breath, through presence, through unconditional compassion. The old monk stood up and opened the door of the meditation hall. Light flooded in, warm and gentle. He said, "The world will not stop changing. Others may still hurt you. But when you carry mindfulness in each step, each glance, each word, you are no longer a leaf tossed by the wind. You become the one who moves the wind in a more gentle, more awakened direction." You stepped out of the hall. The ground beneath your feet was the same old path. The trees were the same ones you passed each day. But your heart was a different river. No longer rushing, no longer restless, but fully present in every breath, every moment, every step. And you understood, mindfulness is not something grand. It is simply life, when you no longer abandon it. Evening descended slowly upon the temple. The wind grew cooler, drifting across the mossy stone steps, gently shaking the wind chimes that hung from the porch. You sat alone by the doorway, watching your shadow stretch long across the old brick courtyard. There were no clear thoughts, no effort to understand more. You were just there, truly there, in a silence that felt alive and deeply human. You realized, for so many years, you had passed through countless days without truly living, so many meals without tasting them, so many conversations without listening, so many precious moments that slipped away like wind, and you never even noticed. Mindfulness is not a technique. It is not an unreachable ideal. It is simply a return to the moment you are living, with the eyes that are seeing, the ears that are hearing, the hands that are touching, the heart that is feeling. Mindfulness does not make life perfect, but it brings you fully into it, and that presence is what makes life profound. The old monk came beside you again, stood quietly for a moment, then said, "Do not wait until something is gone to begin to cherish it. Breathe while you still can. Love while you are still with one another. Live while life is still here. As tender as a warm cup of tea." You looked at him, then down at your own hands. Perhaps you do not need to change the whole world. You only need to change how you show up in it. And from that shift, everything, even suffering, begins to transform. Above you, the clouds drifted slowly, and you smiled, not for any particular reason, just because you were present, just because you were alive. Mindfulness does not promise that life will become easier, but it helps you walk through the hardships with a calmer heart. No more reacting in haste. No more fleeing your feelings. Just seeing, accepting, and walking alongside them, with full presence. Mindfulness does not turn you into something superhuman. It simply returns you to being human, truly alive, truly feeling, truly aware of where you are, what you are thinking, and what you are doing. And that return is the first step toward healing. From now on, you do not need to travel far to find peace. Because as long as you are truly present in the now, peace is already there, like a stream running silently beneath the earth, just waiting for you to be still enough to touch it. Letting go. Happiness is not in having more, but in carrying less. It was a misty morning. You and the old monk walked slowly down the stone path that led into the valley. Fallen leaves blanketed the trail, covering each step like an old autumn carpet. Cold wind brushed through your clothes, yet a strange warmth bloomed in your chest. Perhaps after days of slowing down, you had finally begun to learn how to breathe, and how to truly see. The old monk bent down, picked up a faded leaf, and held it in front of you. "Do you see that this leaf has fallen?" You nodded. He continued, "But the tree does not die because the leaf falls. In fact, by letting go of the old leaves, it makes space for a new spring to arrive. You stayed silent. That sentence landed in your heart like a drop of water in the middle of a drought. In life, you had tried to hold on to many things: a relationship that had changed, a version of yourself that no longer existed, a dream that had passed, someone who no longer loved you. And you called it love, loyalty, living wholeheartedly. But now you suddenly understood, some things are not meant to be held any longer. Not because they are unworthy, but because their time has come to be released. The old monk continued walking slowly. He spoke like the wind whispering to the forest. Many people believe happiness comes from having more money, more status, more love, more experiences. But the more you add, the heavier your heart becomes. The more you cling, the tighter your chest feels. True happiness comes when you can begin to carry less attachment, less resistance, less desire. And then, you will find, your heart has more space. You looked out at the distant mountains, peaks emerging and disappearing behind soft clouds. Nothing out there was clinging. Nothing resisted the weather. Everything simply lived by surrendering to nature. And you began to understand, letting go is not a failure. It is a brave and deeply compassionate act. Compassion toward yourself, for not forcing yourself to keep what no longer fits. Compassion toward others, for not demanding they be who you expect them to be. He told you a story. There was a man who carried a heavy bag of jewels on a pilgrimage. He was constantly afraid of being robbed, so he clutched the bag even in his sleep. But the further he walked, the heavier the bag became. Eventually, he collapsed from exhaustion. When he awoke, he realized he had forgotten why he had started the journey. The goal had been spiritual, not protecting a bag of treasure. And only when he had the courage to leave the bag by the roadside could he truly move forward. You fell into silence. Inside you, there was a bag of stones, too. Perhaps a memory, a grudge, an unforgiven word, a goal you believed you had to reach to be worthy. But it had made you tired. And today, for the first time, you asked yourself, what if I put it down? The old monk stopped by a small grassy patch, sat down, and folded his hands gently in his lap. He said nothing more, but his silence invited you to look inward. You closed your eyes, and in that soft darkness, you began to let go, not of everything, just of one tight corner of your heart, the part that was tired from holding on. Another leaf drifted gently into your hand, light, natural, without resistance, and you understood, maybe you, too, could be like that leaf, letting go gently, changing naturally. As the midday breeze passed over the grass, you and the old monk remained still. The whole forest seemed to fall quiet, as if making room for the voice inside you to speak more clearly. Within you, a question slowly took shape. How do I let go when something has been a part of me for so long? How do I release when that thing once defined who I was? The old monk did not answer right away. Instead, he took from his sleeve a small mirror, old, scratched, but still reflecting sunlight. He held it up before you. Do you see yourself in the mirror? You nodded. He continued, but if you stare at this mirror long enough, you begin to believe that is your only face. And if someone scratches it, you feel hurt, as if they harmed you. You looked at the mirror and understood. There are things that are not truly you. But you have been attached to them for so long. You believed they were a role, a name, a relationship, a success, or even a pain. You held it, defended it, defined yourself by it. But the more you held, the more you forgot. You are not any of those things. The old monk spoke gently. Letting go is not losing yourself. It is returning to the part of you that was never tangled in names, in gain, in expectation. It is learning to walk without needing to prove anything. It is daring to live without needing to be understood, as long as you still understand yourself. You sighed, a long, light breath. You remembered the times you tried to prove your strength. The times you gritted your teeth just to keep up the image of someone who never breaks. You had worn that mask for so long, you forgot your real face beneath it. The old monk stood and asked you to walk back with him. Along the path, he said, people think letting go means losing. But in truth, to let go is to gain, to regain freedom, to regain peace, to regain yourself. You walked in silence. The air now felt lighter. Not because the path had changed, but because your heart no longer carried as much. Each step you took released something, an expectation, a worry, a fear, and then you realized, letting go is not a one-time action. It is a way of living. A way of loving yourself without imprisoning yourself in the past. A way of being that clings to nothing, simply to live more lightly. Evening settled into the valley. The last light of the sun painted soft golden lines across the meadow and along the trees on the hillside. You and the old monk returned to the temple gate, walking unhurriedly, as if every step was a gentle release. As if the whole world had slowed its breath with you. You turned your head to look back at the path you had just walked, not long. Yet it felt as if you had shed a whole chapter of your life. You had not left behind a person or a thing. You had left behind the burdens in your heart, the should-haves, the must be this way, the if only they had not. All of it, invisible chains. And today, you had begun to release them. The old monk spoke slowly, like a song with no melody. There are doors that only open when you carry nothing with you. There are mountaintops that can only be reached when you dare to walk empty-handed. You fell silent. A part of you no longer needed more explanation. Because truth, once it is touched, needs no explanation. It only needs to be lived with. You returned to your room in the small meditation hall. On the table sat a cup of tea, now cold, but when you lifted it and took a sip, it tasted surprisingly good. Not because the tea was special, but because now, your heart was a little less full. And you understood, happiness does not lie in having more. It lies in having enough space in your heart to feel what you already have. That is freedom. That is peace. That is the beginning of truly living. Night fell. The sky turned deep indigo. And in the temple courtyard, only a few soft oil lamps remained lit. You sat by the porch, alone, not thinking, just sitting there. In your hands, a warm cup of tea. In your heart, a gentle emptiness. Not hollow, but spacious, like a room freshly cleaned. Like a heart unbound from old ties. And you realized, letting go does not take anything that truly belongs to you. It only removes the illusion that you must hold on to everything. You do not need to forget. You do not need to erase. You only need to stop clinging. Stop letting the past define your present worth. Stop letting an old wound stop you from loving again. Stop letting a faded dream keep you from dreaming new ones. From the distance, the old monk approached, slow like the evening breeze. He asked nothing, he simply sat beside you. The two of you sat in silence, like two dry leaves resting peacefully beneath an old tree. After a while, he gently said, "The hard part is not letting go. The hard part is believing you will still be okay after letting go. But you will be okay. Because once the old has left, that is when there is room for the new to arrive." You bowed your head. A drop of water fell. You did not know if it was a tear or dew. But you did not feel weak. You felt reborn. And the lesson of the day ended like that, with no bell. No farewell. Only a very real feeling. That you were a little lighter. And light enough to go a little farther. Before going to sleep, you poured yourself a glass of water. Under the golden light, you watched it shimmer, pure. Without color, without scent, without shape, and you suddenly understood, your heart could be just as clear, if it were no longer clouded by worry, anger, or regret. Today, you did not learn something new. You only learned how to let go of what no longer needs to be held. Let go of old resentments. Let go of a version of yourself that no longer fits. Let go of a connection that has worn out. Let go of a dream that has faded. Not to forget, not to reject, but to have yourself back. Before extinguishing the oil lamp, the old monk passed by your meditation room, only to say one thing: letting go is not losing. It is becoming lighter. And the lighter one is, the higher they rise. That night, you slept deeply, not from exhaustion, but because, for the first time in a very long time, your heart carried nothing. The next morning, it rained, not a downpour, just a soft drizzle, like the earth gently exhaling. You sat with the old monk in the main hall. The scent of wood, incense, and stillness spread like a thin blanket over the space. You asked him, "Is there anything we should never let go of?" The old monk looked out at the rain-soaked courtyard and replied quietly, "Yes, truth and love." You remained silent. He continued, slowly, each word falling like a drop. Letting go is not turning away. Letting go is not abandoning. Letting go is accepting that we cannot hold what does not belong to us, but still choosing to love it, even if it does not stay. Your heart stirred. You had once loved someone with all you had, and you believed that to prove your love, you had to make them stay, had to make them understand, had to change yourself, or change them, but in the end, all that remained was exhaustion. The old monk said, "People often confuse love with holding on. But in truth, the deeper the love, the easier the letting go. Because true love does not need control. It does not need possession. It only needs to be given, naturally. Like sunlight, like the wind. You thought of your parents, who loved you in the only way they knew how. Of old friends, who left without a word. Of yourself, who had once blamed yourself for not being good enough. Not smart enough, not like everyone else. And you suddenly understood, perhaps the thing you most needed to release was the expectation to be perfect." The monk looked at you, his gaze gentle like the first rain of spring. Letting go is not just about letting others go. It is also about releasing the hand that has been gripping yourself too tightly. A bell rang softly in the distance. Rain still fell, but inside, something had just dissolved. A knot had untied. A stone had been set down. No reason needed, no promises required, only your readiness. And that was the most beautiful kind of letting go without bitterness, releasing without regret, walking away without running, loving without needing to hold. The rain eased. On the stone steps outside the temple, water had collected in small shimmering puddles, like memories not yet faded. You and the old monk walked slowly through the old wooden gate. No words were exchanged, but within you, a deep inner conversation was unfolding. You asked silently, "Is it possible to let go of the ego? The part of me that always wants to be right, that needs to be acknowledged, that fears being forgotten." The old monk smiled, as if hearing the question within your heart. He said, "The ego is the most tightly bound thing of all. It is not about names, or possessions, or appearances. It is in how you see yourself, and how fiercely you try to protect that idea." You bowed your head. Yes, you had taken pride in your achievements, called yourself strong, capable, always in control, but that shell had exhausted you. Because every failure shattered you. Every misunderstanding angered you. Every time you were not recognized, you withdrew, as if your very being had been rejected. The monk stopped by a moss-covered stone and sat down. He picked up a small pebble from the ground. "Do you see this stone? It has no name, no title, no need to become anything. And yet, it is still here, simply itself. Light and natural." He dropped the stone into the stream. The water flowed around it, not resisting, not clinging. You watched it drift, and understood, letting go of the ego is not losing yourself. It is losing the weight of needing to be someone. You do not need to always be right. You do not need to be strong all the time. You do not need to please everyone. You only need to be real with yourself. And truth is light. He continued. The ego always wants to control people, circumstances, even the future. But life was not made for you to control. It was made for you to live with. You were silent. You remembered the times you needed everything to go as planned. The times you feared losing what was familiar. Feared change. Feared losing control. But life never needed you to manage it. Life only needed you to show up, soft enough, open enough, real enough. And right then, you realized, you no longer needed to let go of any specific thing. You just needed to loosen the way you were holding everything too tightly. Your hands might still carry, but your heart had become light. Late at night, the temple sank into silence. No more bells, no more footsteps, only the wind threading through the bamboo and the quiet sounds of insects in the dark. You lay on a thin mat, eyes closed, no restlessness, no thoughts. Inside you, everything was drifting, naturally, like a river passing through old land, without regret, without looking back. Today, you did not learn to know more. You learned to carry less. Less expectation, less control, less attachment to what has passed, and even to what has not yet come. You were no longer trying to fix the world. You simply laid down the burden of having to be someone. And in that very moment, you returned. Returned to being human, ordinary, but free. Returned to your breath, simple, but alive. Returned to the present, where everything is always beginning again. The old monk said, "The lighter the person, the deeper the heart, the less you cling, the wider your soul becomes." And you understood, letting go is not the end. Letting go is the beginning. It is a quiet nod to life. I am no longer trying to grasp. From now on, I will walk with you. Love, not possession, but liberation. The next morning, the sun returned, after days of gray skies. It lifted the clouds and poured through the trees, leaving golden streaks of light across the damp earth. You sat with the old monk on the temple porch, surrounded by the warmth of tea and the soft chirping of young birds. It felt like just another morning, but to your heart now, everything seemed new. You asked, "Have you ever been in love, Master?" The old monk did not seem surprised. He simply took a quiet sip of tea and gently replied, "I have, and I still am." You stayed silent. Something inside you shifted. Love, for you, had been both your greatest joy and your deepest pain. It was something you once believed you could keep forever, but also something you had to let go of, even while still loving. The old monk continued, his gaze seeming to reach beyond the horizon. People often believe that loving means holding on, but true love is the courage to let someone be free. You lowered your head. Faces appeared in your mind, family, people from the past, those you had once placed too much hope in. And you remembered the times you said, "I love you." But beneath those words was the desire to be loved back, to hold on, to become the only one. You loved, but you also wanted control. You wanted them not to change, not to leave, not to be different from your image of them. The monk looked at you and said gently, "That is not love. That is fear wearing the mask of love. Fear of losing, fear of lacking, fear of being alone." He told you the story of a woman who once came to the temple. She wept because her son was no longer close to her, no longer called her every day. She said it hurt because she loved him too much. But through her practice of meditation, she realized she was not hurting because of love. She was hurting because of expectations. Because she tied her love to his presence, his closeness, his compliance. When she let that go, the love remained, but the pain was gone. You took a slow breath. You realized, love does not exhaust you. What exhausts you is expecting someone to love you the way you love them. The old monk said, "True love does not demand. It does not weigh others down. It is like light, present, but it takes up no space. It is like breath, nurturing, but never binding." You looked out at the garden. A peach tree was blooming. No one was watching. No one praising it, yet it still blossomed as if spring alone was reason enough. And you suddenly understood. Love is like that. When it is true, it needs no reason, no return, no conditions. It only needs to be alive. That afternoon, you stayed alone in the meditation hall. The monk was not beside you. No one spoke. Only the wind rustled the wooden door and the sunlight slowly faded across the cool tiled floor. You looked inward, like a body of water finally cleared. And you saw clearly. There were times you had loved others deeply and forgotten to love yourself. You had been patient with those who hurt you. You had forgiven those who turned their backs. You had offered kindness to the whole world, except to yourself. You blamed yourself for trusting the wrong people, for being too soft, too emotional, not sharp enough. You thought, "I should have been stronger, colder, more rational." But now, in this quiet space, you understood? A heart that knows how to love has never been wrong. Only a lack of understanding had brought pain. And what you needed was not a suit of armor, but a gentler gaze turned inward. You are worthy of love, not because you are perfect, but because you are a human being learning how to live, just like everyone else. Love begins there, with gentleness toward yourself. When you can sit down and say to your own heart, "It is okay. You did the best you could." That is the moment healing begins. And when you stop blaming yourself for being tender, you also stop blaming others for not loving you the way you had hoped. You no longer need them to fully understand you. You just want them to be at peace, in their own way. Even if that means they are no longer with you. The old monk returned after his meditation. He sat down beside you, quiet for a moment, then said, "True love does not need to possess. It is when you can pray for someone, not for them to come back, but for them to be at peace, wherever they are. You give a small nod. In your heart, a name appears so clearly. Someone who once caused you pain, who made you question your worth. But this time, when you think of them, there is no bitterness. Instead, there's a very gentle, very deep compassion, free of entanglement. And you realize, you are beginning to love in a true way." Early the next morning, you wake before the bell. Not from insomnia, but because your mind is still enough to hear a small inner call. Today, live more lightly, love more deeply, let go of expectations a bit more. You step into the temple courtyard, standing beneath the ancient Bodhi tree. Tiny leaves flutter in the breeze, and the morning light filters through, casting soft patterns across your face. You think of everyone who has passed through your life, those you loved, those you resented, those you admired, those you were angry with, and you suddenly notice something strange. Whether they are gone or still here, they are still living inside you. But unlike before, they no longer hurt you. They no longer cause regret. They no longer pull you back into silent questions. Now, they are just flowers that bloomed and faded in the garden of memory. You don't need to hold them. You don't need to forget them. Just look and smile. The old monk steps out from the main hall, walking slowly, as if attentive to the heartbeat of the earth. He stands beside you and gently says, "Do you know? There is a kind of love that does not begin with emotion, but begins with understanding. When you truly understand someone's suffering, you cannot help but love them. Whether they are right or wrong, whether they stay or leave, you stand in silence. It's true, once you understood yourself, you also began to understand others. You no longer blamed that person for being thoughtless, because you see, they might also be suffering quietly. No longer blaming family for hurting you with harsh words, because you understand, that may have been their clumsy way of loving. And so, love no longer stops at those you choose. It expands, to include even those who have hurt you. Not because you are weak, but because you no longer need to be strong to protect yourself." The monk places a hand on your shoulder, his gaze full of kindness. Love does not make you smaller. It expands you, and in that expansion, there is room for everything, even the imperfect. You look around, and see that the world today is no different from yesterday. Only one thing has changed. Your heart, it has learned to breathe. Not for anyone, not for anything. Simply because, loving is how you remain fully human. That night, you sit in the main hall with fellow practitioners. No one speaks, only the soft chime of wind bells and the drifting scent of incense. In that haze of fragrance, you understand. True love does not need flamboyant expression. It does not demand grand words or loud gestures. It can be very silent. It is when you quietly put an extra vegetable on someone's plate. When you give someone else the space to speak. When you sit quietly, not to explain or defend, but simply to soothe them. When you are present, fully, like warm ground beneath, you suddenly realize something surprising. The deeper the love, the gentler it is. The more genuine, the fewer the words. The wider it grows, the less it needs possession. Today the monk is not sitting beside you, but his teaching is present in your heart. Love does not need a fixed object. It begins with one person, and it spreads to all beings. Not because they deserve it, not because they are good, but because they are alive and can suffer just like you. You look at the Buddha statue. The eyes of the Buddha are half closed. Looking inward, that face shows no joy, no anger, no regret, just a very thin, yet very wide smile. And you realize, love is not just something you give. It is something you become. Not, I love you, but rather, I am love. In that moment, you don't need to force yourself to love someone. You just need to live like a flowing stream. If someone is thirsty, they drink. If someone passes by, they feel the cool. No choosing, no conditions. And love like that, it is liberation. Acceptance. When you stop wanting things to be different, you truly begin to live. It was late. The entire temple lay in silence, with only a few soft lights peeking through wooden window frames. You sat on the stone steps, holding a cup of now cooled tea. No one was beside you, but you did not feel lonely. Only complete. You thought of love, not as something to possess, to keep, or to fight over, but as a quiet radiance from within your heart, needing no witness or return. The more you love, the lighter you feel. The deeper the love, the more spacious the heart becomes. You no longer demand that others understand you, nor need the person who once hurt you to return. You simply wish they find peace, wherever they are, with whoever is in their life. And you, yourself, too. The old monk appeared behind you on the steps and softly spoke, as if at the threshold of a journey's end. True love does not bring a sense of having. It brings the sense of letting go, yet still feeling whole. It does not set your heart ablaze, but allows your mind to be still. You bowed your head. Those words weren't meant to be memorized. They were meant to be lived, like a silent vow. From now on, may I love like the earth, not choosing which flower to bloom. Love like the sun, warming all, without picking favorites. Love like the wind, passing through, yet leaving fresh breeze behind. Early the next morning, you sat on a hilltop behind the temple. A misty valley stretched below. The breeze was gentle, just enough to lift a few strands of hair, enough to remind you that you are truly alive. Not rushed, not striving, not trying to prove anything. There was a stillness within you, just cleared space. So light, you could hear a faint thought. If only everything could be different. How many times had you whispered that to yourself? If only they better understood you. If only you were born into a different family. If only your past hadn't been so wounded. If only you hadn't made mistakes, been weak, taken that path. You had lingered on those if onlys so much that sometimes you forgot. The only real thing is what's happening now. The old monk came to sit beside you. He didn't speak at first, just gazed at the forest below. Then he asked, "Do you see that cloud?" You nodded. "Is it fixed into a shape?" "No." "Does it need to change to become better?" "No." He smiled. "So why do you insist you must change before you can be worthy of peace?" You fell silent. Deep down, you knew you had never truly accepted yourself. You were always trying to fix, to be better, to please others, to be loved, and in all that trying, you became tired. Not because you weren't strong enough, but because you never believed you were already enough. Acceptance isn't giving up. Acceptance is the first embrace you give to yourself. It's when you look at your mistakes and say, I am only human. When you stop trying to erase the past and begin to live with what remains. Not because you are powerless, but because you are brave enough to say, I will continue with all that's left. The old monk said, acceptance is the foundation of all healing. Without it, every effort is escapism. With it, every wound has room to breathe. You closed your eyes. The breeze continued. Inside, something softened, as if a rope melted, as if a once locked arm had relaxed. And in that release, you didn't feel weak. You felt you were beginning to truly live. Leaving the hill, you returned along the stone path toward the meditation hall. Dry leaves crunched beneath your feet. Each step carried you through the past, not to reawaken it, but to move through it. There were things in your life you once couldn't forgive, not others, but yourself. Wrong choices. Moments of silence when you should have spoken up. Times you tried to grasp something that was already gone. Moments of weakness that shook your own belief in yourself. You've carried these burdens for years. Unaware. Like someone hauling stones without realizing it. Each time you remember, your chest tightens. Not because others blamed you, but because you can't forget the look in your own eyes on that day. The old monk noticed your silence. He didn't ask why. Instead, he shared a short story. Once, a man was rowing across a river. Midstream, another boat drifted into his. He became angry, shouted, ready to fight, until he realized the other boat was empty. Just a vessel drifting, guided by the current. He paused, then said softly, many of the things that hurt us are that empty boat. No one meant to harm you. No one aimed to hurt you. It's just life's paths crossing. You listened, your throat tight. Perhaps the person who hurt you was also just drifting, like that empty boat. And maybe that day, you were just flowing through your own fears. Your own lack, through confusion, more than understanding yourself. And you learned, acceptance is not an excuse. It's the end of judgment. The end of the struggle with the past. The end of fighting what's already happened. You don't have to erase the wound to begin healing. You just need to sit beside it, as you would an old friend. Until one day, the pain no longer demands your remembrance. The past no longer asks for explanations. Life no longer demands perfection from you. Walking back to the meditation hall, you paused beside a withered tree. No leaves, no sap, just rough bark and exposed roots. An ordinary image, yet suddenly, you saw yourself in it. There were seasons in your life when you were like that tree. Dry, empty, unsure of your purpose. Each morning felt like another day of endurance, not of living. You tried so hard, reading self-help books, seeking momentum, clinging to someone, just trying to escape the emptiness within. But the more you ran, the more it caught up. The more you resisted, the larger it grew inside. Now, you realized, sometimes healing doesn't come from doing. It comes from sitting and admitting, I'm not okay. No hiding, no explanation, no need to be strong right now. The old monk once said, a truly strong person is not someone who's always okay. It's someone who can be gentle with themselves, even when they're not. You exhaled, deeply. A breath not of control, but of release. Release from the pressure to change. Release from that ideal you that never really existed. Release from resisting your own emotions. And strangely, at the moment you stopped trying to become someone else, you began to feel real. You didn't need to push past this sadness today. You only needed to accept its present. No reasoning, no fixing, just acknowledgement. Like that bare tree, it doesn't have to bloom. It only needs to stand there. With no judgment, no one calling it wrong. One afternoon, you and the monk strolled through the back garden. You noticed a broken branch still reaching upward from its remaining stem. Not beautiful, not perfect, but alive. The monk looked at you and asked, "Have you ever loved someone, but inside secretly thought, if only they were different?" You smiled, too many times. You loved someone quick-tempered and wished they were gentler. You cared for someone distant, hoping they'd warm up. You forgave someone, then silently blamed them for not changing the way you wanted. And the more you wished them different, the deeper your disappointment grew. Not because they failed to change, but because you projected onto them a version that was not truly them. Acceptance of others. Letting them be who they truly are. The old monk gently spoke. To love someone without accepting them as they are. That is not love. It is a negotiation between your ego and your image of them. You sat in silence for a long moment. Faces of those close to your heart appeared, some still with you, others far away. You realized you may have loved them deeply, but wanted them to fit your expectations, rather than honoring who they truly are. Accepting others isn't the same as surrendering. It isn't being indifferent. It is facing the truth. Everyone walks their own path, and no one is born to match someone else's expectations. You cannot demand that someone always understands you. You cannot insist they never hurt you. You cannot force a relationship to stay the same. But you can decide. Either continue to be hurt that they are not who you wish them to be, or let go of that need, and love them as they are. Like the rain, rarely on schedule. Yet when you stop blaming it, every rainfall becomes beautiful. Night fell with an amber dusk, gently acknowledging the coming darkness. You and the monk sat quietly on the temple porch. A single leaf drifted onto your open palm, small, light, then swept away by the breeze. He spoke softly. Life is like that leaf. It arrives, then it falls. Green, then faded. Here, then gone. You watched it float away and felt a quiet truth. Since childhood, how many things have you lost? A doll, a friendship, a belief, a loved one, even a version of yourself, once so innocent, so passionate. You had believed that effort, love, and striving could preserve everything. But you see now, it isn't that things left because you didn't try hard enough. They left because their time to leave had come. You lost relationships that once meant everything. You left places called home. You abandoned beliefs that once anchored you. And yes, you were wounded. But now you begin to understand. The pain wasn't due simply to loss. It was because you weren't prepared for that loss. The monk shared a story. Once, someone asked the Buddha, "Teach me how to love without suffering." The Buddha only smiled and replied, "If you love a flower, don't pick it, for if you do, it will die in your hand. But if you simply sit and watch it, letting it be what it truly is. You will understand what it means to love. You sat without speaking, letting his words settle into your heart, a quiet acceptance that needs no effort. No resistance, no grasping, just seeing, and allowing things to follow their natural path. You begin to realize, acceptance does not mean indifference. It is not weakness. It is a kind of wisdom, recognizing the impermanent nature of all things, and letting go of the need for them to remain. You no longer expect your loved one to never leave, nor hold onto a feeling forever, nor freeze a moment of happiness in time, because something beautiful is so precious precisely because it's fleeting. Looking up at the dimming sky, you see a star appear. Not brilliant, not announced, just in its own perfect time. And in that moment, you understand, when you stop demanding that everything change, even the small things can bring profound gratitude. A fresh morning of simply being. The next day you wake before the temple bell, not from disquiet, but because your heart is light, like the gentle nudge of life calling. Wake up, today you don't need to do great things. Just be here. You step into the garden and splash cold well water on your face. The simple sensation, one you haven't allowed yourself in a long time, touches you. You used to wake up to lists. What you must do. Achieve. Complete. Life felt like a race. But this morning, you simply stand there, watching a droplet slide down your hand, and whisper to yourself, "This is enough." You bring your mind to this. Stuck in traffic, and you feel calm instead of frustrated. It starts raining, and you stop complaining. Your body is exhausted, and you don't force yourself to push harder. Things don't go as planned, and yet, you still feel the world isn't against you. You recall the last time you lost your temper over a careless comment, a broken promise, a plan gone awry. You quietly ask yourself, did your anger truly change anything? No, only more exhaustion, only more distance, only more of your ego insisting the world bend to its will. The old monk steps up with a broom, silent, smiling, but his smile, just that, brings you peace. He once said, only those who can accept imperfection truly begin living, because the world will never be perfect for us. But for those who know how to see, it is always beautifully enough. You look around at the worn temple roof, the vegetable garden with a few wilting leaves, the cold cup of tea, and none of it bothers you. Because none of it needs to change to make you happy. Only your mind needs to see them differently. Acceptance gradually becomes your mind's natural response. Instead of reacting, you breathe. Instead of resisting, you sit quietly. Instead of demanding the world conform, you flow with life, not giving up, but choosing not to tire yourself further. One still afternoon, you sit in a simple hut, leaning against the mud wall. No temple bells, no passing footsteps, just the steady pulse of your own heartbeat, a quiet drum reminding you, I am still here. In that moment, no one loves you more. No one hates you more. No one needs you. No one judges you. Only you, facing yourself, stripped of masks, without hiding, and you understand, accepting yourself is the hardest test. Harder than forgiving someone who hurt you. Harder than letting go of the past. Because you know your hidden fears, your silent flaws, your unspoken shame, your unwanted desires. You've worked so hard, not necessarily to be happy, but to be worthy. Worthy of love, worthy of recognition, worthy of staying, and despite your efforts, the question lingers. Am I enough? A question you've never answered with a wholehearted yes. The old monk sits beside you and asks, "Who do you love most in this life?" You stay silent. He smiles and says, "If the answer isn't yourself, then every love you've given might also be your way of asking yourself to return." His words cut through you like cold air, yet they are true. How many times have you been kind, not from the heart, but out of fear of being abandoned? How many times have you acted strong, not to overcome, but to hide vulnerability? How many smiles have you offered, while feeling hollow inside? And in that realization, you understand. Accepting yourself begins when you no longer feel ashamed of being different. When you don't need to prove your worth through achievement. When you can sit quietly and say to yourself, "I am not perfect, but I am real." He speaks softly. One who has embraced their own darkness is no longer afraid of others trying to extinguish their light, because they know the truest light doesn't need anyone to see it. You sit in silence for a long time. Nothing changes outwardly, but you feel a shell dissolving. An invisible pressure releases, and an authentic you, slightly tired, slightly aged, slightly quiet, begins to show up and to be held. You walk along the damp temple path. Stones of mist beneath your feet, quiet as you feel now. Every step carries a new awareness. You don't need to try to become someone else. You only need to return to yourself, genuine and unguarded. You were taught since childhood to strive, to be better, smarter, more patient, more fitting. Over time, you grew up believing you were never enough. Now, you begin to see you are enough, just as you are. So you are always living in a state of waiting until you are more beautiful, more mature, richer, more noticeable. Only then do you think you deserve to truly live. But the more you wait, the more exhausted you become. The more you act, the further you drift from yourself, and the more distant you feel. The less you know who you really are. An old monk once said, "There was a person who wore a mask his entire life. When he was about to die, he finally took it off. But he had already forgotten his true face." You laughed when you first heard that. But today, it sends chills down your spine. Because living inauthentically is another kind of death, quiet, bleeding a little every day. You speak words you do not believe. Laugh when you are not happy. Agree when your heart cries out in opposition. All because you fear people will leave you if you speak your truth. And one day you feel lonely, not because no one understands you, but because you never dare to let anyone see who you really are. You sit on a stone bench by a small lotus pond. The water reflects your face, slightly drawn, with a few new lines, and a tiredness you have not named yet. But you do not look away. For the first time in a long while, you gaze at yourself without judgment. No, I must try harder. No, I need to change quickly. No, I need to prove something. Just being here, with yourself, in this moment, you remember the monk's words. To live authentically does not mean saying everything, showing everything. It means stopping the editing of yourself to please others. It means quietly choosing what your heart knows is right, even if no one applauds. You close your eyes, not from fatigue, but from a deep sense of peace. Because for the first time, you do not have to pretend. No one claps for authenticity, but no one can ever take it from you. You return to the meditation hall. It is dark outside, A breeze drifts through the window, carrying the scent of old wood and lingering incense from the afternoon. The courtyard is empty. No bell, no teaching, only silence and you. No more questions. What do I do next? No more pressure. I must change something. There is only one thing left in you. Presence, whole and without artifice. You are no longer pushed by expectations. No longer afraid of not being enough. No longer chasing the image of an ideal self. You are being yourself, with all your flaws, all your imperfections, all your contradictions, and also with the first kindness you have ever given yourself. The old monk once said, "Freedom does not come from having more choices. It comes from no longer wanting everything to be different." You quietly repeat to yourself, "I no longer need things to be different." Not because you have attained some higher state, but because you are tired of driving life to fulfill your desires. You want to live rather than control. You begin to realize you do not need to change others to find peace. You do not need to change your circumstances to feel complete. You do not need to change yourself to deserve love. You do not need to be someone else to live peacefully. Simply release the idea, "I must become." You are the wind, no need for form. You are the flowing water, no need to force a path. You are yourself, as the tree, the moon, the rain, not to do anything, but to be present, simply and right on time. You open your eyes. Outside, the moon is high, full and still. Not because it tried, but because it simply is. And you see yourself, just like that. Next scene in the kitchen. The next morning, you are assigned to prepare the meal for the monastic community. The kitchen is small, the firewood damp, the pot is old, nothing is perfect. The flame flickers weakly. The vegetables have a few holes. The rice in the pot is slightly scorched on the bottom. At that moment, a young monk enters the kitchen, looks around, and says, "How come the rice is burnt like this?" You pause. If you were your old self, you might have explained, defended yourself, or stayed silent but burned with anger inside. But today, you simply look at him, smile softly, and say, "Yes, it is slightly burnt. I guess I did not watch the fire closely." You admit that you might be wrong. Acceptance is not giving up. It is not letting pride control your reactions. You continue to cook the rice again. The firewood is still damp, but your hands do not tremble. Your mind does not waver. Because you know, things are unfolding. They do not need to be perfect to still be a right part of life. The old monk walks by, sees you stirring the rice, and says, "Actually, happiness is not found when everything gets better. It is found when you know you do not need them to be any better." Hearing that, you feel a refreshing breeze in your heart. You realize you cannot control others' emotions. You cannot make everyone satisfied all the time. You cannot do everything perfectly. But you can do something profoundly simple. Accept imperfection, with a wholehearted heart. Acceptance does not make you ordinary. It frees you from the silent suffering that expectations bring. Later at noon, after the meal, you take a bowl to the well to wash. Cold water stings your hands. A young monk stands nearby and accidentally splashes water onto your robe. He does not apologize, just glances and goes back to his task. A familiar feeling arises, discomfort. It is not strong or clear, but it tightens your chest. Your ego whispers, "He is disrespecting me, isn't he?" Another thought, Maybe I should say something gently. Another one. Why does nobody notice anything? You pause for a moment. You look at the bowl of water. Notice the wet stain on your robe, then you take a long, deep breath. And you smile. Not because you are being noble, but because you see clearly. If you speak, you will feel relief. But if you stay silent with resistance in your heart, you will still suffer. So you wash the bowls slowly, one by one, as if you are washing away that discomfort inside you. Not by suppressing it, not by forcing yourself to be good, but by befriending that rising emotion and letting it pass, just like the cool water doing its work. You understand now. Acceptance does not mean allowing others to be wrong continually. It means not letting their wrongness carry you away from the stillness in your own heart. In the afternoon, you walk past a group of lay practitioners sitting together, chatting. They laugh, sharing their good deeds, their journeys, their accomplishments. One was a director, another was wealthy, yet another was invited to give Dharma talks at prestigious places. You pass by quietly, holding your basket of vegetables. Nobody notices you. No one knows what you once were, or what you have been through. Part of you feels peace, but another part aches gently. You once longed for that recognition. You once wanted someone to say, "You are really good." But now, standing there, in the breeze of late afternoon, by the vegetable garden, you realize you do not need to become someone else. You do not need to prove anything anymore. You do not need to stand out. You do not need to be remembered. You only need to live this moment fully and as you truly are. Acceptance means stopping comparisons. It means stopping to look over the fence thinking the grass is greener. It means stopping the, "If only I were like them." The old monk once said, "When you begin to live like a speck of dust, you will feel lighter than the wind." And dust is the place where light shines most clearly. You bend down and pull a handful of earth-covered grains. Your heart remains undisturbed, because you do not need to stand on a high stage to know your value. Simply living truly is enough to be truly present. That night, gentle rain falls. You sit on the monastery porch, wrapped in a thin blanket, watching water beads roll down the eaves. You do not think about much. You do not seek answers for anything. There is no need to understand deeply or realize something anymore. You just stay there. Sometimes, you gently smile, not because something is joyful. Sometimes, you close your eyes, not to meditate or practice, but simply to feel that you do not have to do anything, yet you are still living very authentically. Acceptance, now, is no longer an effort. It is your foundation. It does not come to solve problems, but to be the ground so you no longer see life as a problem. You do not force yourself to forgive, and yet, you no longer hold resentment. You do not strive to love someone, but your heart no longer closes. You no longer think, "I need peace," because peace is already soaking into each breath. An old monk once said, "A person who has not truly accepted still struggles with becoming. A person who has accepted quietly lives like a stream, unhurried, needing nothing, yet full of life." You think of all the desires you once had, to be recognized, to be loved, to stay with someone forever, to achieve success, to be important. Now, you do not reject those desires. You just are no longer controlled by them. You can see your own imperfections. Without hating yourself, you can see others' mistakes. Without judgment, you can stand amid things not going your way. Without shattering, because your mind no longer seeks resistance. Resisting, that wears us out. Softening, that frees us. You open your eyes and look into the darkness ahead. Everything is unclear, shapeless, but no longer frightening, because you no longer need to see clearly to feel safe. You just need enough trust that, even in darkness, you are still here. Acceptance is letting go of the need to shine light on every corner of life. Simply sitting quietly in darkness and realizing you are the light. On one rainy afternoon, you sit in your small room, holding an old letter. No one sends handwritten letters anymore, but you kept this one as habit, or perhaps a wound not fully healed. Inside, you read words once written to you, promises, love, then silence, no concluding farewell, no closed door, and maybe you are still waiting, not for the person to return, but for a reason sufficient to explain why they left. You once thought, if you only understood why, you would feel lighter. If you only heard one last word, you would be able to let go. If there was a little justice, you would stop hurting. But this afternoon, as the rain falls in white sheets, you realize, not everything has an answer. And not every departure needs a reason. An old monk once said, "There are doors that close, not for you to understand, but for you to stop searching. Because if you keep seeking reasons, you will forget the more important thing, that you are still here." Continuing to live, you sit for a long while, no longer reading the letter. You simply let it rest in your palm, like a memory that needs no wrapping. No need to keep it, no need to erase it. Just hold it still, as it is. Acceptance is when you no longer feel impatience. No longer asking, "When will I find peace?" No longer pushing, "When will I forget?" No longer demanding, "Why did I suffer so much?" You simply watch time pass, like rain falling on the roof. Neither faster nor slower. And you know, everything that needs to come, will come. When you are not clutching anything in your hand. Acceptance is also trust. Not trusting that everything will become good, but trusting that you are spacious enough to hold everything, good and not good. Trusting that you can continue living, even without anyone to make it whole. Trusting that you will heal, without knowing what tomorrow holds. Trusting that, even if much is unfinished, you are already living fully, in this very moment. Night has deepened, the entire temple lies in stillness. Only the wind rustles through the bamboo grove, and your heartbeat steadies, like a gentle answer to all the questions you once carried. You sit there, without purpose, without practice, without seeking, no longer wanting to change anything, no longer thinking, "This is meditation," or "This is practice." You are just sitting, and simply being. You do not push thoughts away. Yet you are not swept into them. You do not hold onto emotions. Yet they do not dominate your heart. Your mind is like a lake's surface without ripples. Not because there is no wind, but because it no longer resists the wind. You do not think, "I have achieved something," nor do you call it enlightenment. You simply recognize something so simple that you used to overlook. You can still live, without having to prove you deserve to live. An old monk once said, "A peaceful mind does not come from what you attain, but from stopping the demand that life needs to give you more." You breathe slowly, not to deepen meditation, not to quiet your mind further, but to feel alive, in the most complete state, without adding anything. without removing anything. Acceptance, in the end, is not an action. It is the natural state of mind once all cravings are released. You do not need anyone to understand you. You do not need anyone to stay. You do not need life to be whole. Because you, for not wanting anything more, have become the peace you once searched for. Dawn is near. Soft lavender light begins to wash over the old tiles. The space outside is still misty. But within you, there is no longer haze. You sit there, shoulders slightly rounded forward, palms relaxed on your lap, breath even. There is nothing left to achieve, nothing left to answer, nothing left to fix. You realize, when you no longer demand correction, you begin to truly see, everything has already been enough. Your mind does not shine like a bright lamp. It is just a small firefly, gentle and steady, no longer afraid of the dark. Because you have stopped trying to light a bigger flame. You simply remain in the small light of yourself, and you see that it is enough to warm the whole night. Life may still bring you new challenges. There will still be times you are tired. You forget. You are angry. You cry. But acceptance is not a perfect state. It is an arm always open, no matter how many times you lose your way. You do not need to be enlightened. Just someone who no longer judges themselves when still attached. An old monk once said, "When you stop trying to fix yourself, you begin to truly care for yourself." And now, you understand. Caring for yourself is not indulgence. It is not forcing yourself to always be strong, always be right, always improve, always succeed. It is gently embracing yourself in each human moment of imperfection. You close your eyes again, not to meditate, but simply to let go. Let go of every label. Let go of what should be. Let go of the notion, "I am practicing." You are just you, quiet, present, whole, needing no introduction. You don't need anyone to know how far you have traveled on this journey. Because simply continuing to walk, it is precious. And within each quiet step, acceptance blooms, like a lotus that does not wait for applause. At dawn, you walk around the temple courtyard. Dry leaves crackle softly underfoot, like whispers. The air is cool enough to wake you up. No one walks with you, and you do not need them. You no longer feel incomplete. Today, nothing special happens. No deep conversation, no inspiring Dharma talk, no great moment of realization. Just an ordinary day, and you suddenly recognize that ordinary day is the greatest gift. Acceptance is being grateful for even the days when nothing special happens. No need for a climax. No need for liberation. No need for light shining down from anywhere. Just that you are still living in the quietness itself. You don't need to remind yourself to let go. You don't need to monitor whether your mind is stirring or still. Your mind is not a pond that needs supervision. Your mind is the sky. It can have clouds. It can rain. It doesn't need to always be blue. The old monk once said, "When you no longer demand your mind to be still, that is when it truly begins to be at peace." And you realize, over all this time, you've tried too hard to reach a better state. Better in emotions, better in awareness, better in behavior. You once thought that was practice. But it turns out, true practice is when you no longer desire to be better. You simply are. You pass by a patch of flowers along the road, seeing that one of the petals has been eaten by a pest. Misshapen, but the sunlight still shines on it. and the bee still comes. Because the flower doesn't need to be perfect to deserve to live. Just like you don't need to be perfect to deserve peace. You don't need to be always right to deserve ease. You don't need to always be okay to keep going. You don't need to force yourself to show that you're progressing. You don't need to force stillness to call it understanding the path. You are simply breathing, sincerely, with everything that is, and that is already practice. You sit by the stone steps, watching the leaves sway in the morning light. An ant crawls across your foot, carrying a small folded leaf as if it's a message. You don't analyze, you don't interpret, you simply see, and in that seeing, everything is just as it is. No need to name it. No need to classify it as beautiful or not. No need to search for metaphors or meanings. Just look, and be present. Acceptance, at its deepest, is not resignation. It is not retreating. It is the courage to not avoid anything, even the meaninglessness. You no longer need your emotions to feel light. You no longer need to feel easy all the time. You no longer need today to be better than yesterday. You only need to be honest with what arises within, like a friend who does not judge. Sometimes you feel peace, you accept it. Sometimes you feel unease, you also accept it. Sometimes you feel doubt, you greet it with stillness. And when you notice you are trying, you smile, I'm trying again. Then you let go, not to fix, but to return. The old monk once said, acceptance is not a conclusion. It is the space for everything to exist, without needing permission. Like a yellow leaf falling, no one tells it to fall. Yet it falls, and the earth does not reject it. You look back at your life, once you ran fast, dreamed big, waited for much. Now, you still live in this life. Still work, still love, still dive in, but no longer controlled by the demand for everything to be different. You cook rice, and it might be slightly undercooked. You go to work, and maybe no one acknowledges it. You love someone, and maybe they won't stay. But you don't lose your inner peace because of it. Because you know, nothing has to be perfect for this life to be worth living. Acceptance is when you stop asking, when will it be done? Instead, you gently exhale and say, I am still living, right in this moment. And that alone is a rare kind of completeness. You stand by the shallow well, looking down at the earth. The water doesn't appear immediately. But you know, the water is still there. Only with enough stillness, enough depth, enough patience. And your mind is like that well. Not always full, not always clear. But if you stop long enough, clarity will rise on its own. You once demanded yourself to be peaceful right away, to be strong right away, to be at peace immediately, as if the inner self were a switch that, when turned on, would be bright. But acceptance teaches you one thing. There is no shortcut to true gentleness. It comes from the times when you sit with yourself, when your mind is broken. From the moments when you go to sleep, in an unnamed sense of confusion. From the mornings when you wake up, and there's no clear goal. Yet you still get out of bed. Just that, and you've practiced. You look back at the person who once lived inside you. The one who always feared being left behind. The one who always worried no one would understand them. The one who always tried to live correctly, to avoid being hurt. That person is still there. But you no longer despise them. You just gently sit beside them, without demanding that they change immediately. The old monk once said, compassion, doesn't start by loving others. It begins when you sit quietly beside the pain inside yourself, and no longer wish to push it away. You've read hundreds of teachings, listened to dozens of Dharma talks, chanted countless mantras, but perhaps the deepest lesson came when you did nothing at all. You simply sat in silence, with yourself, on a very ordinary morning. And in that silence, you clearly heard that you are alive. No need to be more successful than yesterday. No need to be more enlightened than anyone else. No need to do anything to prove yourself. You only need to no longer turn away from yourself. Acceptance is not the destination. It is the path you walk, each time you do not turn your back on your inner self. You return to the small room where you sat this morning. Everything is the same: the thin cushion, the incense burned halfway, the windows slightly open for the breeze to come in. But you are different, not because you've achieved something great, but because you've stopped searching. You sit down, not to meditate, not to practice, just to be still. No need to push away thoughts. No need to focus the mind. No need for guidance. There's only a very human and very real presence. You breathe out gently, no longer striving, no longer desiring. Everything was never perfect, but it was never lacking. Everything was never easy, but it was never wrong. You close your eyes, and in the darkness behind your eyelids, you see, you are still here, whole, not needing to be understood, not needing to be named, only needing to breathe as part of life. The old monk once said, "You don't need to be anyone. You just need to never turn away from yourself again." And you understand, finally, acceptance is not the end, but the beginning of all that is true. You can open your eyes at any time, or sit a little longer. Not to do anything, simply to live fully in a moment without resistance. And realize, that is enough. Sit still again, no need to change your posture. Simply let your body relax as it is. No need to straighten your back. No need to tighten anywhere. Just sit still, like a stream of water that has stopped flowing. Now, breathe in gently. No longer than usual. No need to breathe deeper. Simply notice. This is a breath coming in. And breathe out slowly, as if you are letting go of something you've held on to for a long time. Simply let it go, gently. Breathe in. Feel the air touch your nose. Slide down your throat, spreading in your chest. Breathe out. Feel your body lighten, dissolve into the ground, dissolve into stillness. Breathe in, you are present. Breathe out, you are alive. That's it, and that is enough. Now, quietly realize, each breath you take is not just natural. It is the result of countless conditions that have come together. The earth, the water, the light, the plants, your parents, your ancestors, countless generations, you yourself, who have overcome so much to be here. In this very moment, a single breath is a miracle. And you are the living witness to this miracle. Stay for just one more breath. Not to do anything, simply to honor life, right in this quiet moment. Now, as your mind settles through each breath, through each lesson, let the silence in your heart become the space for deeper reflection. Remember that everything happens for a reason. Whether you understand it yet or not, whether you accept it or still resist, each experience, whether joyful or sad, gentle or intense, is bringing you closer to yourself. Nothing comes naturally. Nothing exists on its own. As Buddha taught, Nothing exists independently. Everything arises from conditions. Therefore, if in these moments, you have felt a little peace, a gentle light amidst the confusion, cherish it. And if you can, share that light with others. No need for advice. No need for explanations. Simply being present with an open heart. That alone brings something beautiful to this world. Thank you for taking the time to be present, to listen, and to walk this spiritual journey tonight. If in the past few moments, you found a bit of peace, if your heart has softened, even just a little, then that, too, is a miracle. And if you found this video helpful, please subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next healing journeys. It will still be gentle lessons. There will still be necessary pauses. There will still be space for you to simply be yourself, not rushing, not forcing, not alone. See you again, in the gentle silence of another night.